Okay, so the next topic is lung compliance. Compliance, the name means distensibility. Compliance, the formula for compliance is change in volume per unit change in transpulmonary pressure. That is delta V by delta P. The normal value is 0.2 liter per centimeter of water, which means that if the pressure changes 1 centimeter of water, then change in the volume of the lung will be 0.2 liter. Mostly we calculate total compliance of combined lung and chest wall, which is half 0.1 liter per centimeter of water. Okay, so now this compliance is inversely proportional to surface tension. Means if surface tension is high, then compliance will be low, which means that lung can't be distended very much. And the surface tension is decreased by surfactant, so we can say it is inversely proportional to the amount of surfactant. Combining these both, we can say that compliance is directly proportional to amount of surfactant. Now, what is surfactant? Surfactant is dipalmitoyl phosphatidyl choline, and this is also known as lecithin. It is secreted by type 2 pneumocytes. So now in the lungs, we have two types of pneumocyte, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is occupy 95% surface area and are 40% in number, and other all are type 2. The function of type 1 is to exchange gas, and the function of type 2 is to release surfactant. So now, whenever there is some air-liquid interface, there is a cohesive force between this water molecule on the surface. So, in the alveoli as itself has a tendency to collapse, but the fluid inside it forms air-liquid interface and forms a cohesive force. So, surfactant goes between the water molecules and reduce their attractive force, and thus reduce the surface tension. So now when we do expiration, alveolar size decreases, therefore concentration of surfactant per unit area will increase, which will decrease the surface tension and maintain the alveolar stability, which means it will prevent the collapse of alveoli. Now, work done in quiet breathing. Its value is 0.3 to 0.8 kilogram meter per minute. 2/3 of this work is done against the elastic force. Out of this, 43% is against the surface tension elastic force and 22% against the tissue elastic force. 1/3 is against the resistance force, out of which 28% is against the airway resistance and 7% against the viscous resistance. So now let's see ventilation perfusion gradient in an erect posture. So from base to apex, all of these three things decreases, which is intrapleural pressure, ventilation and perfusion. But V by Q ratio, that is ventilation perfusion ratio, it increases from base to apex. So at the base its value is 0.63, at the apex its value is 3.3, and at the level of third rib its value is 1. Okay, so now average value of V by Q is 0.8. Now the question arises that why secondary tuberculosis mostly occurs at the apex. Why? Because the bacteria causing this is the aerobic bacteria, and the V by Q ratio is maximum in the apex, means it is over ventilated. So here aerobic bacteria will grow faster. So secondary tuberculosis occurs more at the apex. So now let's see partial pressure. Partial pressure of oxygen in the inspired air is 21% and in the expired air it is 16%. So if mouth to mouth breathing is done, so oxygen in the inspired air will be 16%. Normal PO2 is 21% of atmospheric pressure. So this statement means that PO2 is 21% of atmospheric pressure. At the sea level, it is 160 millimeter of mercury, that is 21% of 760 millimeter of mercury. At high altitude, there is decrease in atmospheric pressure, this percentage remains same, but the PO2, because atmospheric pressure decreases, this PO2 will decrease. Now, if we breathe air, first of all the temperature needs to come to the body normal temperature. Then there will be humidification. In humidification, partial pressure of water vapor will be decreased, which is 47 millimeter of mercury. It is same irrespective of the altitude. Now, what happens? First of all, when we inspire the air, 760 millimeter of mercury comprise oxygen and nitrogen pressure, but now it will also comprise water vapors ka pressure. Now what happens? At high altitude, this PO2 will decrease and this total will also decrease. Okay, so how to understand this is that pressure of H2O will remain same and this total pressure will decrease. So PO2 and PN2 will decrease, but the more decrease will be seen in level of oxygen. So there will be more carbon dioxide in the alveoli whose only source is blood, and this increase in carbon dioxide will further decrease the PO2. Now let's see the respiratory exchange. In the arterial blood, PO2 is 95 millimeter of mercury. In the venous blood, it is 40 millimeter of mercury. Saturation in the arterial blood is 98%, which means that all the four molecules of heme are connected with oxygen. But in the venous blood, only 3 are connected, which means it is 75% saturation. Total oxygen is 19 milliliter per deciliter, and in venous blood it is 14. PCO2 40 and 45, and total CO2 49 and 53. Oxygen consumption at rest is 250 milliliter per minute, and CO2 production at rest is 200 milliliter per minute, which means respiratory quotient is 200 by 250, that is 0.8. Respiratory quotient of carbohydrate diet is 1. So respiratory quotient of brain will always be 1 because it only takes glucose. Now see, this is the alveoli, this is the blood vessel. Here pressure of oxygen is 100 millimeter of mercury. So let's start from here. The blood is fully oxygenated in which the saturation is 100%. Now it will go to aorta, and in aorta the saturation becomes 98%. It means that some of the blood is mixed. So what happens in the aorta, some of the blood is mixed with the pulmonary trunk. So this is known as physiological shunting. Now it goes to the capillary. In the arterial end it is 98%, and on the venous end it is 75%. Now it will go to pulmonary artery, and from pulmonary artery now it's deoxygenated with 75%. Now it will go back near the alveoli and exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now let's see the transit time in the pulmonary capillary. The transit time, what does this mean? That movement of blood from arterial end to the venous end. In pulmonary capillary it is 0.7 to 0.8 second, and in tissue capillary it is 1 to 2 second. Now let's see the oxygen transport. There are two ways of oxygen transport. First is with hemoglobin and second is dissolved in the blood. Okay, so in this it's nothing, it's just that we need to remember that there are two ways, with hemoglobin and in dissolved in blood. Now let's see oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. In this we have on the x-axis partial pressure of oxygen in millimeter of mercury, and on the y-axis we have saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. So now we get a sigmoid curve which has a positive cooperativity. Now binding of oxygen to heme molecule increases the affinity of another heme for oxygen, therefore we get a sigmoid shaped curve. So at the 50% saturation we get a pressure, and this pressure is known as P50, and normally it is 25 to 27 millimeter mercury. Okay, so what we need to remember is when this curve will go to the right shift means that P50 will increase, and this P50 will increase means that affinity of the oxygen in hemoglobin will decrease. So we need to remember that FDR means favors delivery right, means when it goes to right, it will favor delivery. So one we know is 2,3-BPG, which attaches to the beta chain of the hemoglobin and favor delivery. Another is increase in CO2, and increase in CO2 means increase in H+, and increase in H+ means decrease in pH, and increase in temperature. So now there is a mnemonic GETA, which increases 2,3-BPG. So what does G stand for? Growth hormone, E stand for exercise, T for thyroid hormone, A for anemia, altitude, and androgens. Now it will shift to left in fetal hemoglobin. Why? Because the gamma chain has lower affinity for 2,3-BPG, and thus it has higher affinity for oxygen. So there is a rectangular curve. So there's a question that in the banked blood there will be no glycolysis, so 2,3-BPG will not be formed. So the hemoglobin dissociation curve of the banked blood will be shifted to left. Okay, so now let's see regulation of respiration. There are two ways, one is neural and one is chemical. So neural regulation components are medulla, pontine centers, and the higher centers, and the higher centers include cortex and the limbic system. Whereas there are chemoreceptors of two types, peripheral and the central chemoreceptor. Now in the medulla we have pacemaker cells, which are known as Prebord-Zinger complex. These are of two types, DRG and VRG. DRG is the dorsal root ganglion and the VRG is the ventral root ganglion. DRG contains only I neurons and the function in normal quiet respiration, whereas VRG contains I and E neurons. I neurons means inspiratory neurons, which function during inspiration, and E neurons means expiratory neuron, which function during expiration. So VRG function when the requirement of the oxygen increases, for example in exercise. So now what happens? Firstly, DRG I neurons are excited, which further excite the phrenic nerve nucleus, and this phrenic nerve will cause contraction of diaphragm and inspiration when occur. During expiration there are no impulses from I neuron, so no phrenic nerve will be excited. Therefore this diaphragm will relax and lead to expiration. Now receptors for this contraction are muscle spindle and diaphragm and intercostal muscle. Okay, so now we saw medullary centers. Now we will see pontine centers. So the function of pontine center is smooth transition between I and E neuron and to control the depth of inspiration. So there are two centers in the pons. The upper one is called pneumotaxic center and the lower one is called apneustic center. Pneumotaxic center is the inhibitory center and the apneustic center is the stimulatory center. So inspiration is stimulated by apneustic receptor, whereas inhibited by pneumotaxic center and the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is stimulated by pulmonary stretch receptor. And this is called Hering-Brewer reflex. What does this mean? That pulmonary stretch receptors when stimulated will inhibit inspiration. Now let's see effect of the high atmospheric pressure. So what are the situations of high atmospheric pressure? First is the deep sea diving and second is the Kaizen workers. Deep sea diving, when in the sea at every 33 feet and 10 meter there is increase in pressure of 1 atmosphere, and in fresh water it is 10.4 meter for increase in 1 atmospheric pressure. In the Kaizen workers, what is the Kaizen workers? Who dig underwater tunnel. So now what is the effect of high atmospheric pressure? First of all, when the pressure will increase, volume will decrease, so lung volume will decrease. Another is if the pressure increases, then the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide will increase. Therefore, oxygen and carbon dioxide tension will increase. Another is due to high oxygen there will be nitrogen toxicity, and due to high partial pressure of nitrogen there will be Kaizen's disease, which we will discuss now. Cazen's disease, the other name is decompression sickness, dysbarism, Benz, and diverse palsy. Now, there are two properties of nitrogen. First, it passes through the cell membrane slowly, and another, it is 5 times more soluble in the fat than in water. So, in the nitrogen toxicity or the Cazen's disease, what will happen? There will be, it resembles alcoholic intoxication. So there will be euphoria, impairment of mental function. So if the diver suddenly rises to the surface, what will happen? Nitrogen will go in the fluid, in the body fluid, and form the bubbles, and this bubbles in the fat can press the nerves and cause sensory and motor deficit. If it goes in the myelin, it can cause sensory and motor deficit, which is, if it is motor, it will cause diverse palsy. And in the blood capillaries, it can go in brain, lungs, hearts, joints, and muscles. In the lungs, it can cause chokes. In the heart, it can cause MI. In the joint, it can cause bends. So what is the treatment for this diverse palsy? Firstly, we do recompression, and then we do decompression, and this both steps are done in compression chamber. Another treatment is oxygen helium mixture breathing. Helium is less soluble in fat, but at high pressure it causes high pressure nervous syndrome, which means the symptoms are tremors, drowsy, no sleep, and depression of alpha wave in EEG. And this is also known as nitrogen anesthesia. So if a person comes to surface by holding breath, what will happen? It will cause explosive decompression in the pulmonary capillaries. Then what we use for deep sea diving is scuba, which means self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Now let's see at high altitude. So what are the hazards of rapid ascent? Greater than 10,000 feet, there will be pulmonary edema. What does that mean? That at the arrival, if a person do heavy physical work during the first 3 days, it will cause hypoxia. Okay, and this hypoxia will increase the permeability of the pulmonary capillaries, which will cause pulmonary edema. It will also cause pulmonary hypertension, which is reduced by taking nifedipine. Nifedipine is a calcium channel blocking drug. Now, during this arrival or during doing physical work, there is increased sympathetic activity, which cause vasoconstriction. It increases the hydration pressure in the pulmonary capillary, which again causes the edema. So, if you are greater than 2 weeks at this level, you will get acclimatized. Okay, so now if you do slow ascent, then mountain sickness will start after 8 to 12 hours and last till 4 to 8 days. So what are the symptoms of this mountain sickness? Nausea, vomiting, headache, insomnia, dyspnea, and irritability. So now let's see acclimatization. So what is the meaning of acclimatization? It is a physiological readjustment and compensatory mechanism in the body that decreases the effect of hypoxia in the permanent resistant at the high altitude. So what is the mechanism? Firstly, arterial PO2 will decrease, which will stimulate the peripheral chemoreceptor. It will increase the pulmonary ventilation, which will lead to carbon dioxide washout, and this washout will again decrease the PCO2, which will decrease the H plus in the blood, and this decreased H plus in the blood will inhibit the respiration. Okay, so now this is the mechanism of acclimatization, that when arterial PO2 decreases, it will decrease the respiration. Now cerebral edema. When PO2 decreases, there will be arteriolar dilation, which will lead to it will occur till the limit of the autoregulation is reached, and after this limit is reached, capillary permeability will be increased, and it will lead to cerebral edema, and it is also treated with nifedipine. Okay, so now let's discuss hypoxia. The definition of hypoxia is lack of oxygen at the tissue level. So what is the the whole pathway. Firstly air go to lung, then to blood, and then to tissue. If less air is going to lung, it will cause hypoxia, and the causes are there is decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the air, and the causes are high altitude and closed space breathing. Then it can occur in decreased ventilation, obstructive lung disease, or morphine. If we inject morphine, it will inhibit the respiratory center, defect in the exchange of the gases, and the VA shunt. What does that mean? It is cyanotic congenital heart disease, which is also called as phallotetralogy. It will increase via the peripheral chemoreceptor. It will stimulate the respiratory center, which will increase the pulmonary ventilation. It will lead to carbon dioxide washout, which will shift the oxygen hemoglobin curve to the left, and there will be less release of oxygen, which will lead to tissue hypoxia. Now, if the blood is not carrying the oxygen appropriately, it is known as anemic hypoxia, and the causes are anemia, hemorrhage, methemoglobin, and carbon monoxide hemoglobin. Okay, and this is not very severe, but exercise will lead to severe anemic hypoxia. If the blood is not able to transport oxygen to the tissue, it is known as stagnant or ischemic hypoxia, and the causes are hemorrhage, circulatory failure, and congenital heart failure. And if the tissue itself can't utilize the oxygen, it is known as histotoxic hypoxia, and the main cause is cyanide poisoning. So this was a major overview on the hypoxia.